Hello everyone, and welcome back to Fly From Home. It's Kitty again here, and I'm back in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 with this thing again. You might be wondering, oh, why is he doing that plane again? Well, given how popular my first video on this aeroplane was, and given that Just Flight have been doing a lot of updates to this thing now, we're now on version 4.0, I thought I'd come back into the simulator and have a really sort of quick look around what they've changed on this thing, and if that has changed any of the sort of negative points that I brought up at the end of that video that I said, you know, could do with a little bit of work maybe. Overall, if you've watched that video, you'll know that I came out very sort of in favour of this plane. I thought it was really good at the time, and the updates have definitely improved it even further. So I would say, you know, if you want a spoiler alert, this isn't going to change my opinion of this aeroplane, it's only going to sort of raise it. Things are sort of getting better and better as the sim improves and as Just Flight sort of work out the little kinks in this thing. So we'll start with the outside. There's not a great deal to talk about. The patch notes have said they have added a marshaller and ground vehicles, a fuel truck I think, to the list of things that you can bring up through the sim, I think. So when you're starting or when you're parking up or something, you should see a marshaller in front of you like you do with the default aircraft. So that's nice. The other thing with the external is that they have sharpened up some of the external textures. Now, if you watched my first video, you'll know I was complaining, well, not complaining, but griping a little bit about some of the external textures not being quite as sharp as perhaps the Coronado and the default aeroplanes are. And you can see that now they have certainly sharpened those things up. You can see that the text around the gasculator valve here is really sharp. I think if I could zoom in far enough, I could probably read that. You can kind of see that it says warning and then a bunch of other stuff below it. Unfortunately, I don't know what that is because none of the arrows I've flown have ever had that little notice intact. It's all obviously been painted over or worn off over time. Interesting point to note about the textures. Apparently, I read something from one of the Just Flight developers that the weathered appearance that they've done for this aeroplane has meant that it could potentially be quite heavy on frames, so they've had to dial back the resolution in some areas where they think people won't be looking too closely in order to keep it running smoothly on the majority of people's systems. So, I mean, that's something I can get on board with. I have a fairly decent computer, and I've never noticed any slowdowns or frame issues with this aeroplane. Or indeed any of the other Microsoft Flight Simulator aeroplanes. But if you're running on a little bit more of a marginal system, that's probably a very welcome thing for you. So that's the reason why, if we go back inside and look at some of the areas like maybe this, it looks a little bit more sort of fuzzy and last gen maybe. But I mean, how many times are you going to be looking up and staring at the dome light or the speaker? You know, it's not exactly a imperative importance. Now, I have the patch notes in front of me for this. There are an awful lot of things here. I'll be here all day if I was reading all of these. But I'm just going to go through from sort of oldest to newest and just read what they've changed on this thing and try and show that to you in the aircraft. So, they have changed the OAT indicator. So this should now be reading ambient. Now, I've got real-world weather set today. It's reading just below 10 degrees. That seems certainly about right. It seems to correlate with what the TAFs and METARs are saying for today's weather conditions. You can see we've got a rather grey-looking sky out there, typical British weather. We've got ELT should be, yeah, set to auto or arms rather than on. Yeah, they fixed that. What else? Engine priming start tweaks for greater realism. manual updated to provide more information on engine priming before startup. Now, I showed in the last video the proper way to start this aeroplane. I will show that again today. We'll just do a quick circuit or something just to show you the way the aeroplane flies, because it has changed a little bit. Mags are on. But we're not going to go too in-depth. But yeah, I'll show the starting procedure. Now, this aeroplane currently, and I suspect it's a limitation of the simulator more than just flights, sort of just forgetting, but you can't really start this aeroplane like the real one does. The real one will fire and start with the mixture still sat at idle. It basically just starts on the little bit of fuel that you prime it with, and once it's running, then you throw the fuel flow forward, and that's what keeps it running. The aeroplane won't fire unless you put the fuel flow forward. So you can sort of do the real start procedure, but to actually get it to catch, you need to put the fuel flow forward, which is more like a carburetted aeroplane than a fuel-injected one. So a little bit of a break in the realism there, but I don't think there's anything they can do about that just yet. I think some of the piston engine logic needs to be improved in Microsoft Flight Simulator before that can be implemented. So some of the circuit breakers have been improved. Landing light illumination area increased. Now, this is a bit of an interesting one. I didn't really mention this in the first video. The landing light does look quite nice with it off. You can see the little lens reflecting there. But if I knock the battery on and pop the landing light on here, I mean, what is that? I don't think that looks very good at all, personally. I don't think that really looks like a landing light. It looks like someone's sort of captured the moon and shoved it in the front of the plane. It's very odd. From a distance it looks okay, I suppose, and you can see the areas are being illuminated on the ground here. But compared to some of the lights in this simulator, they do look really poor, and you could extend that to the navs as well. I mean, you can see that, you know, that's not very good looking, is it? So I'd say that that's still a downside. They still probably need to improve the lights. The beacon light looks okay. If I pop that on there, certainly from this distance you can see it certainly looks like it's a light inside a little glass or plastic jar on top of the tail there, which is, you know, obviously what the real thing is. But the other light's not great looking, so I'll pop those off before I run the battery down. And we'll go back inside. So they've improved the area that the landing light illuminates. However, I think personally they need to improve the look of the lights in the aeroplane as a whole. Propeller animations fixed. Apparently they were wrong. Icing effects added. So that's important, especially in this sim, which seems to sort of go a little bit gung-ho with the icing at times. They've actually added visual effects for the icing. Tweaks to autopilot. Yeah, the autopilot is improved, definitely. I've tried that out since I was playing around with it last time. I don't know if it was messing with the rudder trim or what it was doing, but there was kind of an uncontrollable roll after you disconnected the autopilot. Some sort of strange handling issues popping up. Now it doesn't do that, and it's just as rubbish as the real world Arrow autopilot is. You know, it just controls roll, and it does that reasonably well. So all of you autopilot fans, rejoice. They've improved VR compatibility. Great, I guess, if you have VR. I don't, because I'm a very poor flying instructor. Yoke pitch animations added to exterior model. Okay, so we should be able to see. Yeah, there we go. Look, the yoke's moving in the exterior model. Audio selector logic fixes. Okay, so that's that thing. So I'm guessing when you're picking your ident or COM2, COM1 selection works better than it did. Didn't really notice any issues with that in the first version, but apparently there were some. Yoke visibility, emergency gear lever, co-pilot, chock tie down, tow bar selections. Frequencies of fuel flow are now included in state saving. Yeah, I noticed that. So if you disappear your yoke for whatever reason and then you leave the airplane and you have state saving turned on, which I have, it will save whatever configuration you've got that in. The state saving function is unique, really, as far as I know, to this airplane in Microsoft Flight Simulator at the moment, and it's really, really good. I mean, it really feels like you park this airplane up, you leave it shut down, and then you get back in it, in the same place, and you can pretty much carry on your flight, and it feels like you just parked your aeroplane up and you've got inside for a sandwich or something, and then you've come out back to it and you're off again to somewhere else. So it's really cool. Nice little bit of immersion there. HSI no longer drifts. Well, that's quite important because the HSI should be slaved to the mag compass. It shouldn't drift, so that's good. What else we got? Oh yeah, control assignments. So my honeycomb yoke now works pretty much perfectly with all of the switches and things inside the aircraft. They've also fixed that bug where you could only move the heading and CDI in multiples of 10. It will now move one at a time as you roll your scroll wheel over the little knob here, and also if you roll quickly, it will move it quickly for you. It will sort of change the amount that your scroll wheel is, the rate at which the scroll wheel is changing it. So that's really welcome. That's actually very, very effective. Like that a lot. Landing gear auto extension logic fixes. Now this is something I wanted to show everyone, really. I didn't in the initial review. They actually modelled the quite strange automatic gear extension system that the Arrow has, which is, it works off this little extra pitot head on the side of the aircraft here. Now, you activate or deactivate it using the emergency gear lever. If you want to deactivate it, you sort of lift it up and slide a pin through it on the ground. Which is, yeah, it's annoying. Usually we fly around with it turned off in at our flying school, because otherwise the gear would pop down every time you tried to do a stall maneuver or something like that, demonstrate a stall, which is very annoying. In fact, most of the aircraft that we have, and most of the Arrows in general, have the system either removed or disabled. Just a couple of our aeroplanes at our flying school still have it working. Now, I was going to try and show this to you, but as far as I can tell, it's bugged and it doesn't work anymore. Now, it did used to in the first version when I first reviewed this. So I suppose shame on me for not showing you back then, but I don't know if this is the latest Microsoft Flight Simulator update that's broken this, or that the update's just not working as it should, but I can't now move the emergency lever at all. In flight, I can't move the lever either, so it's not like I can actually use the emergency gear extension system either if my gear pump were to fail for whatever reason. So, yeah, not great, really. I wanted to show that off. Hopefully they'll fix it soon, though, because it does seem like they're quite keen on getting that working. It's one of the quite interesting quirks of this aeroplane in real life. Sun visor animation now visible from exterior. That's cool. So if we were to flip the sun visor down in here and we go outside, you can see that that is now mirrored on the external model. Very cool indeed. Just little touches like that. The task scale on the ASI has been fixed. Okay, so this is one of the little things that Arrows have. You can set your temperature at your cruise altitude, so you can use your Form 214 and find out the temperature at your cruise altitude, set it on here, and it will give you an indication of what your TAS is when you are in the cruise, which is cool. Like an ancient version of the TAS indication from the modern sort of G1000s and things like that. Checklists added. Now this is an important one for a lot of people. I obviously have a checklist from the real aeroplane to hand, and there was a very nice checklist included in the documentation of the aeroplane. However, Microsoft Flight Simulator has this brilliant in-game checklist function here. Now, before, this didn't do anything, but now we've got a really nice, extensive, I think pretty much copied straight from the real POH checklist, straight into the aircraft here, and you can, each one of these things, you click on it, and it lights it up in blue. So if you're not familiar with the aircraft, this makes it very easy to run through the startup procedure, power checks. It even gives you external checks, pre-flight interior, pre-flight exterior, so you can simulate doing yourself a little walk around here around the outside of the aircraft, which is very cool. It's good for immersion. So yeah, really like the fact that they've included this. It's really going to help a lot of people get to grips with this aeroplane if you aren't familiar with the real one. They've added a bunch of sounds, apparently, so background panel rattle, wind noise when the door is closed but not latched, So yeah, that's something that you notice. Sometimes the Arrow 2 doesn't have this big lever here. It just has a sort of spring-loaded catch and a little thing that looks like a car door handle here. So you pull it shut, and if you don't slam it quite hard enough, sometimes the catch doesn't engage. And you don't realise until you're airborne and the airframe starts like flexing around and stuff, and the airflow increases. And then all of a sudden, it gets really, really cold, and you backseat passengers start shouting at you because their feet have turned into blocks of ice. And you don't realise until you're airborne, and there's not much you can do about it airborne either, because of the low pressure area over the wing just kind of sucks the door out, so you can't sort of open it and then try and slam it again in flight. Even if you slow right down, it just sort of sucks the door out, and then it stays out there. Believe me, I've done it in real life. It's not much fun. So that's quite cool. Vacuum-driven gyro noise has been added. It's quite nice little bit of ambience there. New samples for emergency gear lever, which would be cool if we could move it. Annunciator test button. Get rid of that. So this little thing here. I didn't even know that made a noise in real life. And what else have they added? EGT target knob and mixture lock. So the mixture lock is this thing here that you can slide across to stop the lever being pulled back too far and cutting the engine. And the EGT, as this little thing now has a sound to it as well. That's very cool. Nice to see. There's also been a bunch of sound fixes: brake, rudder pedal audio, ground roll volume, startup and shutdown volume, low RPM engine volume, improved surround effect of engine noise, improved wind noise, fuel pump loop, audibility of interior gear attraction. Yeah, I've noticed that the gear sounds much more realistic when you pull it up in flight. Makes quite a loud noise in the real aeroplane. You can hear it quite easily, even though the sound of the plane. So what else have we got? Prop exercise check added to ground power checklist. Talk about the EFB powering back on. Landing gear auto extension light now flashes when the system is disabled, so that's exactly like the real aeroplane should do, but as far as I can tell, the whole auto gear extension system is just busted right now, and I can't get it to show that feature. But yeah, when you turn the auto gear extension off in the real aeroplane, this little orange light blinks at you continuously, which is very annoying at night when you're flying along constantly with an orange light blinking away at you. But it's just Piper logic, unfortunately. But hopefully we'll see all that working again soon, if they bring out a sort of quick fix to that. Reference speeds corrected. Okay, cool. Some more emergency landing gear logic fixes that sadly I can't show you. Yoke timer now takes simulation rate into account. That's quite cool. That's this little stopwatch on here. If you speed up or slow down the time in the game, I guess, it will speed up or slow down to match it, which is good. Ground service support added, so that's the Marshall and fuel truck that I was talking about earlier. And GNS dual configuration added, so that's what I've got equipped to the aircraft at the moment. You can see now we've got a 530 and a 430, so quite fancy. We've gone a little bit upmarket here, got rid of those old 25 kilohertz radios, which are pretty much useless, certainly in the UK now, apart from listening into ATIS and things like that. And we have two 833 spacing radios, which is nice. However, something that I've noticed now, if you were to switch to this configuration, which is just the 530 and the old 25 kilohertz spacing radio as a backup, your DME is now partially covered up by your ADF, which is really annoying because the on-off switch is kind of hidden by the top of this. You can see how they're kind of overlapping a bit there. Now, this is a solid unit. This couldn't happen in real life. This is just they've kind of merged together a little bit. I think this needs to come down a little bit. Maybe there's just been some sort of bug that's moved this up a little bit too far. So yeah, it's a slight error there. You can go back to this. We've still got the GPS 100, which hasn't really changed. They've not added any more functionality to that. You can't put your own waypoints into it yet. I'm hoping that's going to be coming soon. And obviously the old radios here, which you can no longer really use in the UK. So I'm going to go back to the fancy dual GPS config. So that is all of the changes that they've made. Now, they have changed the handling characteristics of the aeroplane slightly, mostly centered around how it handles at low speed. Now, you probably, if you watched my last video, you know that I did a flapless approach into Nottingham and absolutely pancaked it onto the runway. Now, obviously, I put my hands up and say that that wasn't the best flown approach that I've ever done. However, I was sort of out of elevator travel as I was coming into the flare. I literally couldn't pull the nose up anymore, and the plane certainly wasn't too slow for a flapless approach. I think it was about sort of 75 knots, which is really what you should be coming in at for a flapless approach over the tarmac in an Arrow 3. So it certainly shouldn't have been sort of bricking towards the ground like it did quite so hard. They have changed that. It's a lot more controllable at lower air speeds now. It still flies great in the climb, in the cruise, still handles just like the real aeroplane. You'll have to take my word for that because I've not got time to show you all that stuff again. But I'll do a flapless approach, we'll do a quick circuit, we'll do a flapless approach, and I'll show you that the airplane does handle a lot more nicely at lower speeds. Apparently they are working on various aspects of the flight model. It's an ongoing bit of work that they've got, and things are just getting better and better as time's going on, so hats off to Just Flight. Let's get the airplane fired up and go and do a circuit. Okay, so just quickly, I'll show you the starting process and how it's supposed to work in the real aeroplane and how it doesn't quite work the same way in this aeroplane at the moment. So I've got the aircraft ready to prime. Throttle's idle, propellers full forward, fuel flow is back, the fuel pump is on. I'm just going to crack the throttle slightly and just move the fuel flow forward a little bit till we get an indication. There we go. I'll hold it there for about 4 seconds, then pull it back to idle. So that's the engine primed. Leave the throttle cracked slightly. Now, if I, in the real aeroplane, crank the starter now, the engine will fire, and all I need to do once it's fired is throw the fuel flow forward. But as you can see, if I flick my switch on my honeycomb yoke round, I guess, because I can't do it with my mouse, it will just crank and crank and crank, and it won't fire. Whereas if I crank it and then do that, the engine fires. So yeah, not kind of how it's supposed to work in real life. Okay, so here we are at the holding point for runway 06. We're at Leeds East, formerly RAF Church Fenton, today, and we're going to fly a quick circuit. And I'm just going to try and show some of the handling characteristic changes of the aeroplane off for you. So we'll do our final set of checks. So approach path, clear right, clear left, transponder can go to mode Charlie, pitot heat on, and all the lights. We'll start our timer and we'll start taxiing out. Now, as we taxi onto the runway, you may be able to hear some of the new noises that have apparently been added. There's a low RPM panel shake, apparently, is one of the new ones. Certainly one of the ones I've noticed, there's a noise to the brakes now. There's like a bit of a brake squeal as you sort of stop the aeroplane, which is quite cool. It's not something you can always hear because you have obviously headphones on or a headset on. Some aeroplanes do have very squeaky brakes though. Right, we'll pull up on the runway. Set RPM 1200. I'll get rid of the yoke now. Quick check of the wind. Looks like I've got a slight crosswind from the left, so I'll give it a little bit of left yoke. T's and B's the green. Everything good. Okay, Geronimo, let's go. A lot of right pedal still required, which is perfectly understandable. Full power sets. Sense of the yoke, 65 knots. And up we go. Pitch for 80 initially. Fine performance is pretty much exactly what you'd expect. Try and get that ball in the middle, come on. Just looking down a little bit to check, make sure I can still see the airfield below us. We're not sort of drifting off too far. And past 300 feet with insufficient remaining, we'll get the gear up. And we'll go for 25, 25, and start our turn onto crosswind. 1,000-foot circuit here at Leeds East, very minimal airfield elevation, it's a bit like Doncaster. So I'll just fly it at 1,000 indicators. Climb speed should now be 90 knots, let the nose drop slightly. And I'm not going to fly it too tight, so I'll do quite a short crosswind leg. Leveling off now, let the aircraft accelerate slightly. I'm going to pull back to about 18 inches of manifold pressure and then about 2300 RPM if I can get my little thing on my joystick to work. There we go. And we're on to downwind. I'll do our checks quickly. So brakes, pressurised, undercarriage speed check below, 127 gear down. Mixture fuel flow full forwards. Fuel pump is on, fuel is sufficient. We'll do a quick tank change. Flaps, we're going to go for a flapless approach, so we don't need those. Instruments are all in the green. Carpeat we don't have, but we'll cycle the alternate air. No change. Hatches and harnesses secure, and the landing light is still on. So we're just going to go around the back of this little village here, around the back of the railway station, and we'll start our base leg, maintaining 1,000 feet, close enough. About 90 knots, which is perfect, really, for light aircraft in a circuit and a little GA airfield like this one. Starting our turn onto base leg now, I'm going to start reducing power a touch. Ready to start our descent. Just let the nose drop and keep the speed at about 90 knots. Apologies if you're getting a little bit sick from me moving my viewpoint around like this. Unfortunately, that's visual flying for you. You need to keep looking at the target as you're coming around. Start my turn base to final now, still doing 90 knots. Going to come back to about 85 on final approach, which is slightly faster than the full flap approach to protect from the increased stalling speed that we have. So let's bring that power back and we'll do our final check, which is going to be reds full forward, blues full forward, 3 green lights. So we're looking for 85 knots now. Quite a lot of nose up trim required, which is completely understandable for an aeroplane like this. Getting in a bit slow there, speed. See how much power is required to keep the aeroplane going at a decent approach speed. Even with no flap, it's a very draggy aircraft at low airspeed. Aiming for those numbers, ignore the pappies, now we're close to the airfield. A little bit of crosswind from the left still. Bring that power back. Raise the nose to just above the horizon. And we're down. So much easier to control at low airspeed flappers, which is a much better representation of the real aeroplane. Taxi clear of the runway. We'll do our quick after landing checks. There we go. Set the parking brake, RPM 1200. Something I've noticed, in fact, let's do the checks first, then I'll talk about this. So, trim, neutral, flaps are up, fuel pump off, landing lights off, strobes off, and pitot heat off, transponder to standby. That's your after landing checks complete. Pop the parking brake off, RPM idle. And we'll pick a parking spot. Seems to be very popular with pit specials for some reason. I have never seen so many in all my life. Go next to this guy. Oh, and just before we shut down, I'll pop the latch open. You see the door is still shut on the top latch here. But you can hear it's much louder. Probably should have done that in the air. We can hear the air rushing past a lot more easily, but you get the gist of it. If you've got the aeroplane, go out and try it. It is pretty realistic to what the real thing is like. Right, we'll pop the parking brake on. RPM 1200s, and knock all of the electronics off. There, and there. And we will idle throttle, idle fuel flow. Eventually. Mags off, and we take the key out, and battery off. Thanks, Flight Sim. Right. So, have all of my concerns been addressed? No, but it's getting there. I'd still say it's a very, very good aeroplane, and certainly better than every other regular sort of GA aeroplane offered for Microsoft Flight Simulator right now. So I would certainly recommend it if you're into that sort of thing. One more little tweak that I'd like to see added in the future, though, is I was just about to mention it a second ago, but the engine behavior in the aeroplane does seem to just be a little bit laggy, almost. Like, the engine seems the engine response seems to be a little bit behind the throttle, whereas in the real aeroplane, certainly it's at sort of mid to high throttle settings, the engine response is pretty much instant. So, I don't know. That's probably a Microsoft Flight Simulator ism, and they'll improve that as it goes on. Like I said, I think the where's that beacon light? Oh, there we go. The logic needs to be improved a little bit. I've heard some stories about the aircraft's performance at high altitude being a little bit odd as well. I need to go and check that out, actually, because I haven't sort of dragged this aeroplane up beyond about 6,000 feet yet. So that's certainly something I should probably go and do. Then again, I've not really flown the real aeroplane beyond about 6,000 feet, so I don't have any real-world experience to compare that to. But anyway, in conclusion, it's still great. It's improving all the time. We're on patch 4.0 already. So constant improvements coming from Just Flight. So hats off to them. They're doing a great job. If you want to get on board with this aeroplane now, I would certainly recommend it. It's now in the Microsoft Store, which makes things easier to keep updated, because it will update through the in-game updater manager. I obviously bought the original version off the Just Flight website, so I have to download and go and download a new, a whole new aeroplane basically every time an update comes out, so I can update my installed version. But if you buy it from the in-game store, you don't have to, so that's good as well. But yeah, let me know what you think. Thank you very much for all the nice comments and the likes and the subs we got in the last video. It's really, really nice to see and to get a bit of appreciation, I guess. So thank you to all of you who subbed and watched that last video. And if you like what we're doing here, then please give the video a like and consider subbing for this one. So yeah, thanks, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.